Reframing Mindset podcast, where I clear my head of the thoughts that are preventing clarity, practice my speech, among other things. Episodes range from informative knowledge to funny stories about my experiences, and in the future, maybe include interviews. So subscribe and enjoy. Episodes drop every other day. Okay, welcome back to Reframe Myself podcast. My name is Colin Smith Brooks, and this episode is, I guess, the episode about the fourth year experience. And what happened is that with the fourth year experience, I see that the I talk about the post hurricane experience where, so gladly the home is kind of still somewhat intact. But I said the backyard, the tree, a big tree that actually fell down. And what happened is that with the tree falling down, it was what it I said it seemed that it caused some obstacles in my working world journey. So the hurricane actually caused a dent in the working world journey in this part that I was actually progressing and stuff like that. But the the what happened is that when I was working, I could not even tend to this home issue, but I was actually getting money to actually go and buy the right equipment to approach the post hurricane issue. And what happened is that that's the funny thing about this stuff. You're going to realize is that talk about maybe so one man trash becomes another one treasure or something like that. You go and you go and work, and then you get a obstacle like this, and then you because you're just working, you'll be able to get the right you'll be able to get the right tools. So you'll be able to get the right tools to go out and actually go and buy the right stuff to go out and buy the right stuff to get the tools. And what happens is that that tool will be able to solve the situation at that time. And when you solve the situation at that time, what will happen is that it's not unlikely for that situation to come again. But when it comes again, it'll be different. Where we like, oh, all the tools that you actually garnered there will not maybe not be effective to actually go and get you there. That's the funny thing about each year of the whole ownership. Where be like everything that I said maybe was relevant at that time, I'll get you there. But when you actually reach here now, most of those stuff will actually become irrelevant. What happens is that it's not the fact that they are actually irrelevant, it's just that at that time, that was the best situation at that time. Uh, so, so that's the funny thing about perspective of experience. Where be like, this is my fourth year of home ownership here, but yeah, you have someone that have a home ownership of, for example, another like 50 years or stuff like that. Because what happens is that this home it came up far away. The home came up far away, but the if a very strong hurricane comes, I don't think this if another hurricane may be coming, it may not survive this this one. So what happens that that's the funny thing about perspective or experience. It's good to know that I could actually go back to where I started before and have somewhat maybe the hurricane have a better start. I could actually go back to the previous level, better level. That be like, oh yo, have a home and stuff like that, and be like, oh they're starting from scratch, but they're not really from scratch, but they're starting out somewhat better, and then it will be somewhat stronger. But what the lesson from this hurricane experience is that the tree fell down and I got the tools and stuff like that. And what I realized that I got the tools and then cutting down the tree seems impossible. It's because the tree just fell down, the barks are still thick and stuff because it was still flourishing and stuff like that. So if you actually bought the right tools, like for example, axe or whatever, be like I'm gonna cut down these trees and stuff like that, it'll be very hard if you're not as strong and stuff like that. And that's the funny thing about coming out of these things the here's a reality of the people is have the unlimited money and stuff like that. Just go out and be like, okay, I'm just hire this person, get this thing started out and all this stuff. And what happens that you don't never have these issues, but what happens that if you're someone coming up from from nothing and all this stuff, they can't be just be out there coming like, oh, let me go and throw money on this. That's the funny thing where you hear me now saying I got the latest iPhone and stuff like that. Or when you hear me say that or stuff like that, is not the fact. One of the funny thing about having that latest phone and all this stuff, because the current phone that I have now, it, it's not the good thing about it is that the lessons that I learned for this phone make the the lessons that I actually learned make this phone the um getting a new phone will be more sturdier than before. So it's not the fact that the phone, the iPhone or stuff like that will be actually better or anything like that. It's the lessons that I actually learn from all the other phones will make, for example, lessons like, for example, having a screen protector. You hear about the episode with that, forgot, and stuff like that. So water, make it water resistant and all these stuff. And what will happen is that when you actually see me get these phones, I will come in with all those experiences and be like, oh yeah, boom. And what will happen is that, oh, it's a maybe a software iPhone or stuff like that. But now I'm getting used to the technology and be like, oh, all the previous experiences I have came in and be like, oh, is let me get a screen protector. Let me get a cover and stuff like that. And what will happen is that you see me come in and buy a phone like that, and then boom, it's just very foolproof, foolproof. I know what, and why is it foolproof? Because you're out there, so you put in, you had a very various experiences of things like that, having various problems that you have to solve, and in solving those problems, what will happen is that you're out there struggling and all these stuff. You're, you're out there so struggling and all this stuff, and then what happens is that one day you come in and you get the solution. And then, for example, future stuff that you buy, they never have that solution. And why is that? Because every time you go with that thing, you have all those, you are the walking experiences of those times. And be like, when you go in, be like, oh, you just naturally be like, oh, this is this and this is that. And it's like, what happened? And it's like, no, you're actually the walking experiences. Like, for example, the tools that you have are the walk experiences that you have. So that's the funny thing about the podcast as well. You see, one day you see it come in and be like, oh, it's a very functional podcast and all these stuff. And be like, oh, it is, like, no. Happens that on the journey you'll see various experiences that happen. And then boom, the podcast or wherever it's at the time is the foolproof, is all the experiences come together at that time. I feel like, oh, no, that thing is there and stuff like that. Or every future business that come from me or stuff like that will be all the experiences that I get garnered at that time, and that's, and you'll be like, oh, yo, you did, and so that's the point thing about experiences. You, what will happen is that no matter how, even if you don't have work experience and stuff like that, just natural life experiences will have you tendency to be like, oh, in an upgrade from this struggle, you'll be walking, you'll be future proofing that thing. So boom, you'll be like, oh, your phone will be like, never. If you have buy a phone and then, for example, you're out there so having screen cracker and stuff like that, future phones and stuff like that, you never hear of yourself out there so having a screen cracker and stuff like that, because what will happen is that you'll out there so live the experiences of having a screen crack and be like, these stuff. And that's the funny thing about the episode about trying the premium version of this stuff before trying the full version. What will happen is that boom, you work and get that. I say iPhones are expensive and stuff like that. So you work and get the iPhone and get a new phone, and then get the new phone, and the screen is not cracked. You're gonna be like, oh my god, I'm in heaven, bro. Phone without the screen crack, and it's like you're gonna be less likely to want that screen crack again. You'll be actually doing preventative measures, or like, for example, you see people out there so with charging port and charging port, and the charging port is very broken and all these stuff. And then what happened is that I said these are some of our meeting because what happens that terrible tech ownership and stuff like that. But what will happen is that those stuff you can actually overlook and be like, ah, yeah, 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 and all this stuff. But when you actually, the funny thing about in the adult years is that when you actually have to work to get these stuff, it, those experiences are funny. Those experiences are gonna be like, wow, they're really living a floppy life. When I get the new, you're gonna say something like, oh, I was actually really living a floppy life when I get the new technology. That's the funny thing about getting this new laptop and all this stuff. Be like, oh my god, they hear me struggles out this trying to fix that old laptop. And maybe I was trying, maybe still try to fix it, but I got get this new laptop, and it's like, wow, most of this stuff is actually way more primitive, primitive and all these stuff. And it's like, and what will happen is that you hear me complain. Like for example, maybe you hear me complain about lightning and all these stuff, and then boom, I get a technology now, lightning proof. Well, they have things that's so protected, but everything lightning proof and everything. And it's like, oh, what happened is that no, I did not, I did not start it out like this. It's just that I get all the tools and then boom, you see me living that reality, a better reality than before, and that better reality than before was due to all the experiences there. So the podcast did say, yeah, this was how I was back then. This is why I got this. And then because I got this now, you never hear me having those problems again. But that doesn't neglect the fact that thunder still exists and all these stuff or anything like that. That's the funny thing that boom, you say, oh, you say get for example, a screen protector or stuff like that. The screen protector can break and all the, well, I don't know. But that's the funny thing about everything. You when you actually have the experience, then you're actually able to go and upgrade your experience. You're gonna realize that, bro, that other experience it was really so far. So it's not the fact that you cannot go back to those levels and all this stuff, but it's gonna be like when you go back to those levels, you're gonna be like, wow, that was really some subpar level. That really was some subpar experience. And that's the funny thing about actually going back now and using the free version of for example, YouTube and stuff like that. I'll be like, oh my god, this really eyes and all these stuff. And be like, ah. But at the same time, the premium version ain't cheap. You can't just be out there or anything like that. So that's the thing about a big business. When I say a big business, running up on all these stuff, running up and doing stuff, it's like, yo, these things aren't cheap. You can't be out there just running. That's the point. Running, you can't be out there so running these stuff for yourself. Then that when that hire like 10 million people to go and run this stuff for it again, it's like those stuff ain't cheap, bro. Those stuff ain't cheap. So that's the thing. But no, the episode is basically no for the fourth year of um the fourth year of uh the home experience. We are talking about the hurricane, the tree fell down. So because I got the tools and everything in the fourth year, I was able to go and purchase some tools and all this. So and the tree was really hard to to go down. But what happened is that all the experiences that I have from out here, talk about compound learning, made made me realize something. So I left the tree for some time, and then I come back and I look. I'm trying to go and try to deal with the tree. And what I realized was that no, I guess maybe like July 2020. In so it'll be update, it'll be like, oh, it seems more easier to go and cut the tree now. Not only cut the tree, all the other stuff that I had way before, like barks and all this stuff, is way more easier in the 4D of homeownership to actually get rid of compared to the previous years. So it will be heavy for me to move all these stuff and all these things. And what happens is not the fact that, for example, I got stronger and all this stuff. Of course, actually, I got stronger and everything. But what happened is that time. time actually was the benefit of in this year. We'll be like, because time took because it's another year and these stuff. What those branches, those big bark trees that seem hard to actually move, those years become way more easier to move now. So it's become way more easier, and that's the funny thing where then not only that, when I actually remove those parts and all this, I replace them with more productive plants. So sometimes you hear me still complain about the fact that I'm cutting those trees and all this stuff. But what happens is that each time I go back and remove it, so I try to replace them with more productive plants, the are more productive things in the backyard. So what will happen is that sometimes I go back in the backyard and then you still complain, oh my god, I still have to do this, and then eventually you'll be like, oh, all you see is just for fruits and all these stuff. All you see is just productive plants. And what will happen is that what is become a chore of dealing with the backyard now becomes like, oh, you're just going out and just doing some stuff. And what happens is that these are the experiences that you actually experience in these coming up years to say that, yeah, yes, if you're also living that easy life long more, you know. Not only that, the funny thing about when actor reach those levels is that when actor reach a level, you find a better way. For that's the funny thing about electric and gasoline and all this stuff and stuff. So there's still way more ways to go. There's still more ways to go. But um, the good thing, but the important thing for this episode is that blessing is in disguise is that the hurricane come and took down that tree. And what happened is that that tree was it gave me fruit that I had to actually go out and maybe purchase or stuff like that. But it was very hard for me to get those fruits because it was so high getting the stick and all this stuff. But what happens is that I have multiple of those fruits in the backyard, and the natural tendency to be like, oh yeah, let's just get rid of all those fruits. But at the time, if you could not reach all those fruits, getting rid of all those trees and all these stuff. Because a tree like that doesn't grow quickly. A tree like that that fell down doesn't grow quickly. So just going around and just chopping down all those trees is not something easy. If you were to go and replace that tree, it's not something you could be like, oh yo, I just go back and all this stuff. So that's the funny thing about all these stuff. Um, some of these trees take years to grow and become fruitful. So you can't be just out there to be like, let me just schedule it, let me just get rid of all these trees. So what happened that because I actually go and get rid of the hurricane come and took down this tree. The next tree that came up now is way more manageable. I mean to get way more fruits from that and way more because it's way but not only that, because I'm getting way more fruits from that, I'm getting stronger. And then what will happen is that as that tree grows, I'll be able to actually able to get the fruits from that tree because what happens is that I would actually get stronger with the tree because the tree feed them with nutrients and we're growing together. So that is the next thing about that the blessing in the skies, getting that new tree up. I would actually be able to go out and get those new grow together with the tree. And as the tree grows, I'll be able strong enough to actually pick the fruits from the tree. But the funny thing about the next thing about perspective or experience coming out from from my grandmother's home and stuff like that. What the other thing from the hurricane did was, when she was coming up and talking, she was always complaining about a light post that she always was complaining about a light post that was at her front home and always talking about how it's gonna fall and all this stuff and people always coming and crying about that one life post. And what happened is that for years we have this complaint that nobody came to solve it. And it took that hurricane to come and took down that tree. Sadly we had no light and all this stuff. But it took that hurricane to come and took down that post for them to replace it and we get a better post. And because we get that better post now, that issue was solved. So that's the funny thing about having a blessing in disguise is that. most of the complaints that you would have had normally, it would take a natural disaster to come and actually come in and remove those stuff and get the people to actually come out and actually fix those stuff. So, and then what happens is that you'll be like, oh, the disaster, oh, you work to get your you work to get your $1 million home, you work to get your $1 million home, and then, for example, the the hurricane comes and destroy your $1 million home and all this stuff. You know, sometimes the blessing in disguise is that when you actually get this $1 million home destroyed, is the blessing is that you actually come in and can build a $3 million home immediately and all this stuff. And so that's the funny thing about blessing in the sky perfect experience where I could have been here. The blessing in disguise in this hurricane is that that one fly post issue that she was complaining about for years actually was solved. The breadfruit tree that I would complain about not getting has gone, and I have a new breadfruit tree that I actually can grow, get sustenance from it, and all these stuff from it because I can actually reach it real quick, easier, and give me more time to actually learn how to deal with those trees and their stuff. So that's the funny thing about home ownership. You're talking about fruit ownership and all. Learn how to deal with fruit and all these stuff. These are the funny things you're growing up in these years. You learn how to not only manage your home, manage the backyard, and learning how to actually come in and get the most of those fruits. Because, for example, that's the thing about you have that breadfruit tree issue, but you have things like coconuts that is very different tree and all this stuff. So you have those various trees, and if you're someone coming out in the adult years, they go to that. There are families that go in and have living experience, but one day you will actually have to go out and do these stuff. And if you do not, and what happens is that you're coming out and you just started out an expert. You're starting out an expert, and then boom, it's actually real life. You'll actually go out and die and start an expert, and there's no coming back. So you have to actually take your time and use the small steps. Use the small steps and like, okay, this is how you actually do this. So then boom, you can get you can read every time you see when a coconut herb, you can get the full extent of every fruits tree, and then that one that because you always getting the full extent of each tree, you can get the maximum value of the tree, then maybe get and replace it with someone else. But if you do not know these basic steps, you will come in and then see $1 million home. And just like me, that's one thing about coming out of there, which is you hear me see the $1 million home and you hear people complain about why you doing that and stuff like that. But what happens that you can't see the bigger vision because of that perspective or experience. This is my 40 of home ownership compared to someone else that living it for 58 year and all these stuff. They so seeing stuff that I can't see, but because they can't, I can't see at the time. When they do it to their home and stuff like that, it take me some time to see the blessing in disguise and be like, okay, now I actually see development that in my home and stuff like that. So that's the funny thing about this next lesson from this experience. So that's basically for this episode. Thank you for listening. I look forward for the next episode. Okay, welcome back to Reframe Myself podcast when it's concept of sun. I guess I have to actually record this whole episode over again. Parts of it is actually being missed out. So I have to actually work on that. Gladly I got a new laptop and stuff like that, but for some reason part of the episodes are keep being burnt out. So I have to actually wonder why those stuff happen. So this is another thing in the podcast journey. And what happened is that I said that's the funny thing about all this stuff. One day you come in and see everything working very, 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 very clearly or stuff like that, and be like, how did everything start reading so clearly? And it's like it was obstacles and things in the way to actually get these stuff um done done. So basically basically what that so basically what this episode is basically what this episode is about is post um 40 year of ownership. I talk about the post um hurricane experience again. And what I realized is so I got some tools and stuff to try and clear up the backyard and all these things. And what happened was that when I just started to look at the post hurricane things, I'd be like, oh my god, this seems so impossible to clear up. I got all the right tools, but the things are so the tree that fell down is so strong. It's so strong. The tree that is so strong. That is so testing. Wait. Testing. Okay, so I think I found the issue. I think I found the issue now. Why that is not working. Okay, so actually, I the funny thing about all these stuff. You're just learning to use the tool as you go along. So I think I found the issue as to why it's not recording now. Okay, so I have to just be mindful. I have to be more mindful of that going forward. See with the reframe mindset podcast. I guess I have to actually be more mindful of this. So yeah, I guess I have to actually keep the mic closer. uh, so let me just check something again. Test. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So what? So basically for this episode, so what happens that the tree fell down, and I'm looking at and be like, I got all the right tools to clear up the tree and be like, oh, and then I go back and see that the tree isn't isn't is still there, are still hard to actually go down. And what happens is that if you listen to the 40-year home ownership, you actually realize that there are other actual things that I actually need to get rid of as well. So you have other branches and all these that I actually need to get rid of as well. So what happened is so looking at the thing, I realized that they we uh at the time when I looked at the situation, it was seem impossible to actually go and seem impossible to go and it would have seemed impossible to go and cut down the backyard at that time. I'd be like, oh my god, you'll be out there so because what the tree is just fell down, the branches are so strong and all these stuff. And it would take someone more experienced to actually go and clear down the tree and stuff like that. But what you realize is that over time, what I actually realize is that the tree, the tree actually got way more, got drier. Got, the tree, the tree branches got drier, and what seemed like more impossible to clear up became way more manageable. Became way more manageable to actually cut and all those stuff. But not only that, um, the next good thing about this that tree going down was that originally that tree was very vital in my first or third year of ownership of giving me food and stuff like that. But it was very hard to get those trees because it was so high. It was so high. But what happened was that because I have multiple of those trees and the natural thing in this 40 year stuff like when I have multiple of those trees the thing is the natural thing to think about is to actually go and be like, oh, let me get rid of this tree because I have so many of these trees. Let me get rid of it, and that's a natural tendency. Then you have someone like you and you new homeowner come in, see the tree, and be like, oh my god, I can get this. It will save me enough money if I'm buying this item from the um from the um just give me that.
Okay. Yes, so it would seem that it would be easier for me to check.
Okay, welcome back to the Frame Mindset Podcast. In this episode, I guess another episode that I learned, another thing that I learned in fourth year of home ownership. And what happens that so now I'm speaking after in force, a force hurricane and stuff and gladly the home is still here. And what happened is that I actually bought some tools actually coming and what happened was that the backyard, a big tree in the backyard fell and all these stuff. And the big tree fell. We out there have to clear up the backyard of the tree. And what I realized was so when the hurricane just came down and looking at the tree and trying to clean up and stuff like that. And sadly due to work I could not even go and actually go and actually go and clear the backyard or anything like that. But you know, now I'm able to access the situation. And what I realized was that what seemed looking at the cutting down a tree, that tree, and so I get all the right tools and everything for the tree now. But and then not only that because I was working and I able to buy all the right tools to get the tree. I could use the tools to cut down to do other stuff as well. Cause for example, you will hear me what you hear me upgrade, you hear me using for example machete, and then you hear me upgrade to something else. And you'll be like, okay, all of a sudden person was all of a sudden this person living a rich lifestyle. I was like, no, throughout this was what happens that you see someone strong are able to chop and use every tree and be like, oh yeah, all of a sudden he's able to do these stuff immediately. And it's like, no, these were what happens that there were small steps that happen and then all of a sudden you see they're able to live this strong and whatever lifestyle and then what happens that there are risk to each of these situations where some don't get to live to tell the tale like that's the reason why. So with everything is a learning situation. So what happened was that due to this hurricane, the tree fell. What happened is that if you remember, if you're small and you're just trying to cut down a tree using, for example, an axe or anything like that machete or what force or any tools, well, I was afraid that the axe or machete, I realized that you have to be not only for one, you have to actually learn how to use an axe. You can't be just going out and be like, oh, because at the machete, you have to actually learn. But the next thing is you have to if you can use it, you cannot just the tree isn't as strong. The tree is really strong. For example, like you can just go out and just basically say I'm gonna use an axe and just cut down a freshly tree that has been dropped off a hurricane and stuff like that. You have to be really strong. That's why you have things like power saw or stuff like that. But what I realized was that after the hurricane and I had said that sometime glad as I talk about retirement episode and and get some time to look at the whole look at the tree like year a year after the hurricane or something like that. Alright, sometime. What I realized was that what seemed like an impossible task clear up the backyard, that tree, that big tree. So then it became easier uh, over, over time. And what happened is that it is not the fact that I got stronger or anything like that. What happened was that the tree actually got drier. The tree lost its fervor and stuff like that. So what breaking a branch or breaking the the branch or the trunk or the tree became way more easier than before. So what was seem impossible what happened is that in the fourth year of the home ownership what I realized was that all the stuff that I was seeing from back in the first year to now, it compounded in that all of a sudden the backyard all those things I was saying in the backyard became way is becoming way more easier to do. Like the tree is able to be cut easier. The the because the branches are dry and stuff like that. The raking up the yard is done faster. And what happens is that sometimes I'm raking up the yard now. What I see is more productive plants in the 48, more productive plants than less productive plants, if you get what I mean. So I reap some potato and stuff like that. And then gladly, one of the lessons in this in New York entrepreneurship is that I actually live some fruit tree. And what happens is that naturally you will think about, okay, I come into a home and I see that I have this fruit tree. I have multiple of this fruit tree and be like, oh my god, I'm not gonna cut down the rest of it and stuff like that. Then what happens is that you have a thing like a hurricane, this situation, a hurricane came, blow down one of the most critical tree that you've always working on. And then what happens is that this tree, because it's so large, is not one of those trees that they can be like, oh, in a year or two, I will start getting trees out of right now. These trees take like, for example, 20 years, maybe years or something like that. They even grow right, or to actually get these further right, they can't be just out there so chopping down those trees. You have to actually get those trees don't grow on leaves. I would they talk about the thing like money don't grow on trees and stuff like that, but these trees don't just grow like that. You have to actually they take time. So what happens is that because I have multiple of these trees in the backyard, what happens is that that tree it gave me a lot of meals available, but I was not strong enough to reach that high tree. So because I could reach that high tree, I could not get the maximum yield of that fruit tree, even though it was very valuable. But what happened was that because of the hurricane, that tree fell and it was like sad. It's like, oh my God. But the blessing in disguise was that for me, the homeowner, that tree was very out of reach for me to actually get the fruit. So what happens is that the new tree that spurs up now, I'm able to get more fruits from it. And then not only that, with experience, I'll be able to be like, okay, properly manage the tree so that I would always able to get the maximum yields of the fruit, of the tree and stuff like that. So these are the things coming out of the hurricane, the 40 year home actually. Like, oh, just doing that, get the tree, cutting down the yard and stuff like that, clean up the backyard and stuff like that, get way more manageable. But not only that, what you have is you have way more productive plants in the clearing up and stuff like that than unproductive plants. So like for example, you have weeds and bush and all these. You have weeds and bush and stuff like that. What will happen is that because they're cutting and actually planting more productive plants, what happens is that when you go into your backyard, even though you'll be like, oh my god, I'm gonna have to, for example, rake up a yard and stuff like that. I'll be like, oh my god. When I go to the backyard, I'll be like, oh my god, I'm waking up less of the yard. I'm just moving stuff and actually seeing like, oh, I have more productive plants. I have potatoes. Maybe once I may have some tomatoes and stuff like that. I may have this sugar cane, and then after when that go and then we have more productive plants as well. And then not only productive plants, I have plants like I use for horticulture, for beautification and stuff like that, and things like that. And that's what happened in the 4th year of ownership where we like, oh, sometimes you have something negative like a hurricane that could come down and blow down your home and stuff like that. But the blessing is in these stuff. You have to actually, that's funny thing about the free mindset podcast is that something like a disaster like this comes to actually come down and kind of tear down what is not necessary. Because, for example, funny enough, to talk about perspective or experience, the hurricane came and there was a very, very post issue that when I was in my grandmother's home that she would always complain about that light post issue and say and she always mention it from way back when it's that oh yeah that light post is gonna fall down any moment and it took this hurricane to actually make it fall down. And what happens is that due to that, the light company actually came in and fixed that light pole and actually have a better light pole. And what happens is that sometimes it takes a natural disaster like this to actually get the changes that you hear people complaining for years to see that and stuff like that. So unfortunately, this clean up the messes and stuff like that. But these are the blessings in disguise where we like, because of that life post got fixed. At one that you learn that one of the next lesson is that you learn that sometimes when you actually clean up the stuff, if you're not able to do it, maybe you have to get someone experienced. But if you're not that rich or stuff like that, so you can't just get anybody to do it. But at the same time, if you can't get anybody to do it, what you can do is actually leave it for some time, leave a tree for some time and our bark. And what will happen is that over time it will get more drier. And what will happen is that what seems like a very impossible thing to move, like a bark or stuff like that, becomes way more easier to move. Because what happens is that it got more drier, stuff like that, and require less energy to move those stuff. So what happens is that nothing did change about the home or stuff like that. Just that certain stuff got easier to maneuver. And then, so that's basically another lesson during this hurricane experience. Where we like, sometimes I have to cut down a hole, and I cut in a tree or stuff like that. Sometimes I just left it, leave it for a while. And then what? This is the lesson you actually learn in this phase, because what happens that maybe in the future you'll be able to get something like a power saw or anything like that, and then boom. As soon as the hurricane comes and knock down a tree, at one that you will not be sad, but you can just basically just go and just cut it down and all these stuff. But this is the lesson in the fourth year. If you do not have a power star or anything like that, just basically leave it for a while. The tree will get drier, and then you'll be able to cut it down when it gets really dry. The branches will get easier to maneuver and all this stuff. Yeah, so that's basically it for this episode. Thank you for listening and look forward for the next episode.
Well, this is the end of the episode. Thanks for watching and look forward for the next episode. To support this podcast, go to anchor.fm/cssb/support or become a sponsor for this episode. If you have a product that you want to have more exposure, DM me on the Instagram page Reframing Mindset Podcast or on Twitter at ReframingP. Either way would help. Thank you regardless for listening, and here's a preview for the next episode.